guys. No need for introductions. Anyone got a question for Mr. Mcdonald?
What was the thinking behind Travis Head not playing that game?
Yeah, I mean, we valued others' skill sets in those extreme conditions higher. I think the discussion point that we went through in the process will be different to the hindsight, and the hindsight is that those people that you'll compare the competition for place around didn't perform the way that we probably expected.
Yeah. And so, do you think you need to make changes for the second test?
I think we'll go through our usual process and discuss, and we'll work through what the surface is. And the surface is definitely going to change from Nagpur to Delhi, and this was always going to be a surface that offered the most amount of spin traditionally, and that's what we got. Unfortunately, we didn't maximise that first innings. You win the toss and you put 177 on the board. That's well short of where you need to be, and their ability with the bat in the lower water is always going to be a point of difference throughout this series. We feel as though that our ability to get big runs in the first innings plus their ability to get lower water runs is probably going to be the differentiator across the series, and that was the realisation that we had at the back end of the game.
How did you go about it? How did you go about explaining it to Trav, and how did you take it?
Exactly the same way as I explained it to you. So everything I've said there around what we valued going into the first test was explained to Trav, and he had different thoughts on that, and that's fair enough, and he's entitled to have different thoughts on that along with others. And we're not saying any decision that we make is right or wrong. The Todd Murphy one was heavily discussed as well. Could we play the ball spinning in two of those types of bowlers against the Indian batting lineup? All those discussions that we have behind the scenes are pretty much what you discuss as well.
How did you review it before? How do you review it with the batters given the plans that had coming in?
Yeah, we felt as though we probably weren't as proactive as what we needed to be in the extreme conditions. And Gaul, we showed that in Test Match 1 where we were really proactive. And in this instance, we probably weren't. And that showed up in the second innings. If you stand still and look to defend for long periods of time against that quality spin lineup, you've got a pretty much a ball with a number on it. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get into the method that we wanted to apply. We saw very little sweeping, which is something that we valued leading in as well. So we'll review why that was the case. And there's no doubt that when you're under extreme pressure like that and you're behind the game, that sometimes you narrow in, and we need to be more expansive than that. And if we get behind the game, we need to be braver and more proactive next time.
Do you feel like there were more similarities before test number 2 and 3? Did you get enough to have that balance? If you did feel like that, you did feel a bit concerned that it might be a
That our last two times in the subcontinent have probably played out the same. Yeah. First innings runs, we put a value on that. I think the Gaul one was slightly different. We were 5 for 3 under overnight. We're in a really solid position. This time we're 2 for none, and the fast bowlers opened us up early. So every game is different, but if you look at a trend in the game, not enough first innings runs, lower runs from the opposition, getting behind the game, and then under extreme pressure, not being able to get into the way that we want to play.
Do you expect that adjustment, Ron, how is that because the conditions are so different? Like, is that why you haven't made so mistake, I guess, in the test?
What's that, sorry?
Why is it so hard, I suppose, to make those adjustments that you're talking about there that have contributed to those same mistakes over the 2 tests in a row?
Yeah, I think it's the pressure that builds up on you. When you get behind 200 plus runs behind the game, and you feel as though my way out of this is to take my time, defend, and if you're not proactive, as I said, like if you allow the bowler to dictate to you in those spinning conditions with a vertical plane bat over and over again with catches around the bat, as I said, something's going to happen. So I thought Steve Smith summed it up really well after he come off. He said, we're going to have to be brave, take some risks, take the ball down the ground if we need to, push some fielders out, and to get ourselves the ability to rotate the strike and get singles. And they were able to crowd us, swarm us, and we weren't able to push the fielders back. And if you looked at the way they played, they were able to push the fielders back. They took calculated risks. So you can always learn from your opposition, but you don't want to be them in the same instance as well. We're going to have to do it slightly differently. We haven't got the same players, so we've got to assess where we're at.
How do you think Dave Warner's going at the moment?
Dave?
Just the way he's playing.
It's just a sample size of one game in Nagpur, so it's like all the other batters will go through. We'll prepare. There's an opportunity for the batters to get down there today and practice on a day 4 wicket. So there's a couple of players taking that up, and we'll work through his individual method, the way he needs to go about it to optimise his performance here.
Well, Mitchell Johnson saying at home that you should bring Travis Head into David Warner, and there are some people reporting that that's talk around the team. People
discuss that at all. We've discussed the performance of the first Test match. We haven't even got into a selection discussion. Once we've got an extra time, the benefit out of losing the game so quickly is we've got a little bit more think time to work through what the scenarios are for us, and that starts today when we go down to the ground and work through that. So that hasn't been discussion at this stage.
I guess a real key is if Cameron Green's fit.
Yeah.
Mail is he's travelling pretty well. You reckon?
Yeah. I mean, we're hopeful. It's been 6 weeks now. I think he's actually got his final X-ray or scan today. So he does allow us different options to the way that we want to structure up. And also we've got Mitchell Stark, who flew in last night. So he's flying straight to Delhi. He'll have a rest day today, and then he'll train tomorrow on his own up there. A couple of the staff members have gone up there. So we're hopeful that both of those are back on the selection table. And would that change the balance of our side? Yeah.
Pat ruled off out last night.
Yeah. So, but he's close. So I think that's just probably the load in that Achilles. We just don't want to push it. He's going to have 3 days off and then have a main bowl. If he gets through that, then he'll be back on the table.
The flip side of the productivity with the bat is controlling the tempo of the ball.
Yep.
One of the best periods in the game you had was Bowles and Murphy going together. They didn't bowl together after that period, after the recession. And Scott only bowled 7 overs in the innings. Was that an error? Was he underbowled in that innings?
Was he underbowled? No, I think it was about right. I think that we wanted to come in with our quicks and reverse swing. We probably didn't get as much reverse swing as we thought, and nor did they. So they tried at periods of time. We saw Shammy come on for one over spell to see what was reversing. We saw Pat try that as well. So there wasn't as much reverse on offer, but definitely Scott Boland did the role we expected him to do. He allowed the spinners to be well placed, and we knew that we were going to have combinations where Pat and Scotty would bowl with a spinner down the other end, and then there was going to be other periods where the spinners bowled together. The question for us, was it too similar with two spinners operating in tandem, spinning the ball in? Did we use enough angles over and around at certain times? But I thought Todd Murphy was we talk about all the negatives out of the game, but I thought that was a huge positive for us as a team, and it gives us a different look at potential structures for the next team come Delhi.
Around the second innings collapse, is there also a reality check of just playing test cricket in India where you have all the best plans, but when you're in the middle and things are happening very quickly, it is quite tough to adjust and get those plans in place?
Yeah, it's pressure. It's simply put, it's pressure, and I think we're encouraging our batters that when we are under extreme pressure to expand more, to get into the way that you want to play quicker. In Australia, you can probably sit in, absorb a little bit of pressure, and then expand. Whereas over here, you can't do that. So we need to get proactive from the get-go. We need to get into the method that we want to use. If that's sweeping, if that's playing off the back foot, if that's coming out of your crease down the wicket, we need to encourage our batters to be able to do that, as opposed to just thinking they can sit in, take some time. And there's no reward for taking time here, is basically what we're saying. We're saying you've got to get into how you want to play. We saw Pujara, even albeit a real small sample size, he was active in the way that he wanted to play.
I think just Rohit Sharma and the rest after the game said they're used to playing on challenging pitches in the last 4 years, and they will be challenging pitches for the rest of the series.
Yeah.
How do you read into that? Does that also fall into this role that you have to just be more proactive and just challenging?
Yeah, I think the first Test match of any series sets the scene to potentially the surfaces that you're going to encounter, and we expect no less. Albeit it'll be slightly different. The soil up there is a little bit different. Those types of things. So it'll be a different challenge, but we feel as though that the extreme spin challenge will be there throughout the whole series.
How's the mood in the camp after such a tough loss like that first up? Pat seemed pretty positive about it in the press yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 4 Test match series, isn't it? So other teams have come here, and I think if you take it too hard, if you feel as though your preparation was good and the way that you want to go about was good, you recommit to that. If you shift and try to change too much, I think that's when you get lost as a touring team. And we see teams come to Australia and do the same. We need to be committed to what we want to achieve. Will there be changes? Potentially. We've got Green and Stark coming back on the selection table, so that will totally change the balance and how we want to go about things. However, we feel as though when we come here, we had a clear vision of how to play, how we wanted to go about it. And we need to reinvest into that. We feel as though it can work, and the players within that change room are very capable for the challenges ahead. We had a slight setback in the first Test match. We got behind the game. We clearly know where we need to improve. If we can improve those areas, the margins will narrow up pretty quickly. And are we able to shift pressure back into the Indian dressing room? That's the key. It was on us most of the time because of that first innings. If we can start to shift some pressure into their room, I think most teams are very similar in the way that when they're under pressure and stress, how they perform. Obviously, it can taper off pretty quickly.
How badly did you want to get left out sooner right for this series and not having a change?
Yeah, well, we feel like with the balance of the squad, we wanted 4 spinners here. 2 going in, 2 going away. That's been heavily discussed whether we need a spinner to go the other way. So Matt comes in with Mitch going home to see Jess for the first childbirth. So we're incredibly happy for him to be able to take that opportunity to head home. We reinforce our spin stocks with Matt Kuhneman. He's a live chance to be able to play the next test match, there's no doubt about that. If we play 3 spinners, then we clearly want backup here and available in the squad. If that's the way that we go, and that's why we've got 4 spinners in the squad.
Good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.